What's up YouTube, it's Dragon Blitz here, and I decided I wanted to make this video because when I first made the cheater exposed video, I didn't expect it to get as much views as it's gotten so far. I'm very appreciative of how many people have checked it out, and so many people have said a lot of nice things, but I guess there's a couple of things that I could have clarified a little bit better, and I can use this video as a reason to go a little bit deeper into some of the mechanics that I kind of glossed over that I think will help explain some of the reasons why I made the arguments that I did make in that video. Basically just adding extra context. So the three things I think I should go over to clear the air that I think some people didn't quite understand is why exactly I made that video. I basically did a brief overview of how the floor clips work in SotN, but I'm going to go more in depth in this video to explain exactly why. I want to explain exactly why getting 7 unbuffered floor clips in a row with no setup is actually humanly impossible. Not improbable, but actually impossible. And then I'm going to go over a little bit of the left plus right issue. I think I didn't really explain it very well. There's some people out there that seem to be confused about what left plus right is or whether or not it should be allowed in speedrunning, but I'm going to get into that.
Also, I highly recommend that you watch my cheater exposed video, as it's going to give you a lot of context into what it is that I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the video. If you like the content, please consider subscribing, and let's get on with the video.
So I didn't think I would need to reiterate exactly why it is that I made the video, but essentially I wanted to clear the air about what is and what is not reasonable to see in a SotN speedrun that is performed by a human without extra tools or cheats. That's all I wanted to do. I think people misunderstood what I was intending to do in the video. I even go over in the video, in the very first 2 minutes of the video, I start talking about why it is that I'm making that video. Basically, the reason I'm making this video is because I don't want people to get the wrong expectation for what SotN speedrunning really is and what an RTA runner is capable of. And none of this would bother me if the person just was honest and claimed that the run was performed with save states and that it's a tool-assisted speedrun. I think a lot of people don't really know the difference and probably wouldn't have cared if they were just honest from the start of it. But the whole point isn't to say that this person submitted runs that were cheated or anything like that. It's more of I want to clear the air about what is and what is not possible for a human to do in SotN and what people should expect if they care to watch more SotN speedruns. Next up, let's talk about the left plus right issue. So let's go over what I originally talked about in the cheater exposed video when it came to left plus right inputs. I claim that it is not possible to simultaneously perform left plus right inputs at the same time in SotN on original hardware without using modified controllers or forcibly activating the left and right sensors on the controller, bypassing the D-pad altogether. Those are the only ways to do it on original hardware, and it requires hardware modification, and that is why it is not legal in a normal speedrunning sense. The reason why these rules exist is so that way there's no inherent advantage in using modified tools and hardware as opposed to the original hardware that the game was designed to be played on, or at least officially licensed hardware that the game was designed to be played on. Allowing left plus right would give an unfair advantage to individuals who are playing SotN on emulators that allow for left plus right to be used by using a keyboard or some other various methods. Some individuals claim that it is possible to press both left plus right at the same time using a DualShock controller, pressing one direction on the D-pad and the other on the analog stick. One individual went as far as to post this on Reddit, as well as harass myself and other SotN community members about their genius revelation. Something that has never been seen to be performed in the history of the PlayStation is somebody pressing left plus right in SotN on original hardware. But yeah, that guy's an idiot, and both myself and Mouse have video evidence that it does not work on original hardware, whether it's a PlayStation 2, PlayStation 1. The original game is not designed to have left plus right inputs, and the game doesn't read analog stick inputs at all. Unfortunately, that person forgot the simple fact that SotN was programmed and released before the release of Sony's first ever analog control stick controller. The game doesn't respond to any inputs when the analog button is pressed. In fact, the reason that there's an analog button in the first place on a DualShock controller is the fact that in order to be backwards compatible with games that were programmed before analog controls, they have a switch that disables the analog controls as to not have unintended consequences and make sure that they're backwards compatible. So when in analog mode, the game accepts absolutely no inputs from the controller as it's designed to, and when in digital mode, the game ignores the analog stick because the analog stick is not active. Both what I'm going to be showing you right now, as well as a video made by Wildmouse, who is the developer of the SotN randomizer, as well as SotN.io. Very knowledgeable, very understanding of the game, has basically peered into the game's code more than most people ever could or ever would. And between myself and him, we've tested basically every console combination and version combination and shown that left plus right is not possible to do on original hardware without hardware modification. But now let's switch over to the scene so I can show you guys what I'm talking about.
This is going to be a kind of short video response to Robert Cop 84's video entitled SotN Double Input Skip ? Wherein he supposedly performs a simultaneous left and right input on a DualShock 2, which allows him to skip the prologue fight in Symphony of the Night. It's my assertion that he's using some kind of modded hardware somewhere in his stack, because as far as I know, and as far as nearly everybody in the console gaming world knows, simultaneous left and right is not possible on unmodded hardware. He is seen holding left, not only just seen, but he says in the comments that he holds left and then wiggles the analog stick from left to right, and I'm going to show that that does not produce the result that he shows in his video. And you can see I'm holding left, and I'm going to wiggle this stick back and forth, and you're going to see that only my left input is registered by the game, okay? Now I'm just going to wiggle the stick, and you'll see that the game completely ignores the analog stick. Same for the right analog stick, completely ignored. The D-pad, on the other hand, everything works as expected. Now, he says and the analog mode is not required, but just, for the sake of completeness, let's turn on analog mode. Okay? It's lit up. And you'll see that the analog sticks don't work as expected, but no inputs work whatsoever. Okay? If I try to soft reset with start and select, nothing will happen.
All right, so real quick, I'm just playing on my PlayStation 2. This is the 75K model, specifically 75001. Completely unmodified. Here I have just like a standard DualShock 2 controller, and right now you can see that the analog button is not lit up. That's what it looks like when it's lit up. That's what it looks like when it's off. And here, I'm just going to be like moving around the game normally. Left and right works, jump, attack, backdash, all that fun stuff. But the analog stick does not control anything. It doesn't do anything. Same with the right analog stick. Both analog sticks are not doing anything. So maybe turn on analog mode, you might think. Well, analog mode actually doesn't allow for any inputs in the game. And just to prove that this controller does work with analog, I'll switch to a game that does accept analog, which is Spyro the Dragon. And I guess real quick, I can show you the physical disc to show that I'm not running some weird version of the game. Standard. You can even see in the ESRB rating right here, SLUS0067, just a black label Symphony of the Night disc. Same console, same controller, same settings, same everything. When the game boots up, it's going to turn on the analog mode. Yep, there it is. The game boots up, analog mode turns on automatically. And just to prove that the analog stick does work, let me boot into game. And here, analog stick works just fine. I'm controlling Spyro with the analog stick. But yeah, turn the analog stick off. Analog does nothing. Everything else still works. But that's because this game was programmed with analog controls in mind, which is why the analog stick actually registers for this game. Symphony of the Night was not programmed with analog sticks in mind. In fact, it was programmed before Sony even released their first ever analog stick controller. So there was no way for them to program analog controls. So there was no way to press left and right at the same time. And even in a game like Spyro, wow, look at this. It looks like it's prioritizing one over the other, even though I'm pressing right on the analog stick and left on the D-pad. Wow. The moral of the story is, if you're gonna try and call me out, at least be right with your information. Don't harass me with something that's easily disprovable with just 5 minutes of testing. I've seen a lot of people say that my arguments for why the floor clips being suspicious wasn't compelling enough. So I figured let's go ahead and dive deeper into floor clip mechanics and how exactly they work, and why it is very clear that no human could ever achieve a run like this without cheating.
In my original video, I didn't want to take up a ton of time explaining the floor clip mechanics in depth and then apply statistical analysis to all the floor clips in the run to try and prove whether or not the run was cheated, as I felt the rest of the arguments in that video would be more than sufficient to prove that fact. However, I underestimated how hung up people could get over how I structured my arguments, instead of the fact that if you combine all the suspicious activity together, the conclusion is very clear that the run is cheated regardless, which in fact was the main goal of the video. However, this is what we're going to be doing now. We are going to be over-explaining that this type of run is not feasible for a human to do without cheating. So to start, floor clips in SotN are dependent on a few factors. The speed the wolf is moving at, as well as the timing of the jump and the untransform, the collision and angle of the slope that you're jumping into and untransforming into, as well as the positioning of the wolf, both its pixel position as well as its sub-pixel position. The simplest way I can explain what sub-pixel positioning is that you can think of it like a hidden stored value in the game that will determine where you end up after a certain movement. So with different sub-pixel values, your positioning could be different even if you performed the same exact movement and button presses. The simplest example I can give is of Alucard's walking speed. Alucard's walking speed is exactly 1.5 pixels per frame. So that means on the first frame, assuming his sub-pixel value is 0, he will move forward by exactly 1 pixel, followed by 2 pixels, followed by 1 pixel, etc., etc. But if Alucard has a stored sub-pixel value that is high enough, this will cause Alucard to start walking by 2 pixels forward instead of 1.
Here's a visual representation of starting in the same exact position and doing the same exact inputs for the same number of frames and getting 2 different outcomes because of 2 different sub-pixel positions that are completely invisible to the player. In both instances, I'm starting in the same exact pixel positioning, but because I have 2 different stored subpixel values, in the first example, I start walking to the left and only move forward by 1 pixel. And then in the second example, I start walking to the left and start by moving forward by 2 pixels because the subpixel value is different.
Pretty much every action that is used for speedrunning in SotN completely scrambles the subpixel value. Because of this, there is no way for you to be sure exactly what subpixel value you have in a given moment, without doing some form of an alignment setup, such as rubbing against a wall or doing constant movement setups, something like crouching and doing full jumps, full backdashes, normal walking for very precise amounts of frames. And to tie all this back to floor clips, these floor clips are insanely precise. You have a very strict window to perform both the jump and the untransform in order to actually clip into the geometry successfully. However, these tricks become even tighter without subpixel alignment, and sometimes become flat out impossible to perform. So, if someone were to attempt these floor clips with an irregular subpixel value like the cheated run did, the success of these tricks no longer becomes about executing them with perfect timing and button presses, because that is not enough. So when you factor in that these pixel-perfect wolf clips also require specific subpixel values, the success of these tricks becomes effectively random if you do not control for those subpixel values. This makes the highest possible chance of clipping into the floor, even with perfect execution, only 50%, and that's only assuming that the floor clip subpixel requirement is a binary, and not a smaller range of subpixel values that work. So, for the sake of simplicity, let's assume that every floor clip is on average the same difficulty to perform, a frame-perfect jump input followed by a frame-perfect untransform. For reference, the game runs at 60 frames per second, meaning a frame-perfect button press must be performed within a 16.7 millisecond window. Hitting 2 frame-perfect inputs back-to-back in a short period of time is extremely difficult. Not humanly impossible, but extremely difficult to do consistently. Let's use myself as an example. Even after putting in tons of hours of practice into a specific floor clip, the library floor clip, which is used in the any% speedrun, this floor clip, if performed unbuffered, would save upwards of 2 seconds over how it's performed in my world record run that uses map buffering. So I've been practicing every day to get this clip unbuffered for about 30 minutes a day in order to try and save that time when I eventually go back to try and get a new world record in any%. I've even made a video with audio cues that sync up with the button presses in order to internalize this timing with this trick. This floor clip also has a subpixel positioning setup where you walk against the ledge, perform a mist into a wolf transformation within a 7 to 8 frame window, and this will cause the wolf to automatically dash just by holding left. This is known as an auto dash, and it puts you in the same positioning every single time. And with all of this preface, I think it's safe to say that this is near a perfect case scenario for someone attempting a floor clip like this in the game without map buffering. Is myself performing this floor clip specifically, the one that I've been practicing every single day. So both myself and Talek tried to see how many floor clips we could get in 5 minutes. This was supposed to be like a fun exercise that we did the other day. And I'm going to be using this example as a metric for what the percentage chance of how likely it is to get into the floor with a floor clip. In 63 attempts where I both dashed and untransformed into the stairs, I only got 6 floor clips. So by this sample size, the success rate was only 9.5%. Let's even give this person the benefit of the doubt. The benefit of being built so incredibly differently as a human being that they are twice as good as myself, the current world record holder in every Alucard category on the leaderboards. But even if you assume that they're twice as good as me, because they don't use any positioning setups, this lowers their consistency for these tricks by at least half. And for the sake of simplicity, let's assume that it's a 10% success rate, because that's an easier number to work with. That 10% success rate is with me being as generous as possible with how the subpixels will affect their success rate, as well as assuming that they are twice as consistent at these floor clips than I am. Even with all these leniency, the odds of getting 7 different 10% floor clips in a row is 1 in 10 million, or 10% raised to the 7th power. So statistically speaking, the run only has a 1 in 10 million chance to finish with all of those floor clips first try. And to put that into perspective, the run of this category shown is about an hour and a half to complete. That means for a run like this to be statistically expected to complete with all 7 floor clips in a row first try would only happen after 15 million hours of gameplay. That's equivalent to 1,712 years of gameplay before a run like this is expected to have happened. So 1 in 10 million is extremely unlikely, especially considering they only had 3 months to perform this run since their last run that they posted on their YouTube channel. And that's just the odds for the floor clips being successful. That doesn't include the odds of getting any of the other frame perfect tricks first try, or the statistical likelihood of their movement being so incredibly close to macros. These odds become so ridiculously far-fetched that it's not worth calculating and it becomes effectively 0. So this is why it is suspicious that someone chooses not to set up these floor clips without using some sort of subpixel setup in map buffering, because that would increase the likelihood of these floor clips being performed by insane amounts. Something that becomes 10% consistent could easily become 80 or 90% consistent first try, as opposed to resetting for literally thousands of years to get a good run. So I think it's pretty clear without a shadow of a doubt that the run is obviously cheated, and you can't logic your way out of that fact, regardless of if you think that I didn't argue the fact that this run is cheated well. It doesn't change the fact that the run is indeed cheated. And hopefully with this clarification, maybe you learned a little something about SotN speedrunning, which ultimately is the goal of this video. Hopefully you learned something new about SotN speedrunning, and hopefully this could help clear the air a little bit about why it is I made this video and how it is that I know for a fact that this run is cheated. All the links to everything that I've referenced is going to be in the description. Thank you so much for your time. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you like SotN or speedrunning content in general. Consider checking out my Patreon. You can follow me on Twitter if you want. You can follow my Discord if you want. And yeah, thank you for your time.